Hello everyone, today we are playing some Modern. We got some Scapeshifts. Basically, the list at the top 8 of the Grand Prix is pretty normal. This is GP Oklahoma City. And I want to get a little something extra out of my deck. And a lot of people have been trying Coiling Oracle lately. I decided it's time to give it a try. So, the deck is pretty similar to all the other versions. The only difference being I have an extra land. I have a Helmar Depths. I do think that Scapeshift in general should probably play 26 land just because you do want to hit your land drop every turn, and having to play something like a Farseek or a Sekiro Tribe Elder just to kind of use that to make your land drop is not really what this deck wants to be doing. This deck wants to be ramping, and that includes making your land drops. So since the deck wants to play a land every turn, like you really never feel like you're actually getting flooded. So we do have the extra land. It is kind of a utility land and helps set up our Coiling Oracles. So not only do we get kind of the best of both worlds with the Sekiro Tribe Elder, but we also get the 1/1 to stick around, which might be relevant if, you know, we need to attack them down to 18 because we can only Scapeshift to deal them 18 damage before maybe they kill us. Or, you know, maybe you want the extra land in play right away, and you don't necessarily want to block that turn. So I think Coiling Oracle, like, assuming it does what you want it to do, which is basically just, like, put a land into play, I think it is in the realm of, you know, it's getting very close to strictly better to Tribe Elder if it always does what you want it to do. So if you're able to set it up, then it is much better. If you're not able to set it up, it is probably worse, considering what the deck wants to be doing. But I felt like, you know, we could try and give it a shot and see what happens. So we only have 3 of these bad boys or girls, you know. Looks kind of like a guy. But Helmar Depths set it up. Also have Serum Visions instead of Peer Through Depths, which I think is actually a pretty reasonable swap just because you don't necessarily always want to peer into instants and sorceries. I do think that there are certainly times when you want your cantrip to hit your land drops, and Serum Visions does just that. So I don't know. I think it's pretty weird for all the Scapeshift decks to just be like, all right, we're playing 4 peers, end of story, you know. So I generally like Serum Visions in this deck over Peer Through Depths. You certainly run into games where you can't necessarily find a Scapeshift in time, and that certainly stinks, but that's just kind of the product of playing a 1-card combo deck with no real efficient tutors in the format. I've seen some people play stuff like Dark Petition. People have talked about Bring to Light, and those things are just not efficient. So this is just one of those decks where you get in good a lot of the time. You go through a lot of cards, and hopefully you find your card and are able to resolve it. The other thing that is slightly different about my deck is that I have Explore instead of things like Farseek. So the good thing about Explore and Coiling Oracle also to some extent is that late game, when you have like 8 lands in play, you don't really need any more lands. And Explore and Coiling Oracle can both turn into spells potentially, which is very, very nice. So also with Explore, you want enough lands to be able to hit your land drops, kind of similar to Coiling Oracle also. Like, you want your deck to be full of lands, so you actually have a pretty good shot of hitting. And both Explore and Coiling Oracle have the upside of putting the land into play untapped, potentially. So I do think that when these cards are working, they are doing a much better job than the, you know, just normal ramp spells. So that's why I'm going with those. And then, you know, my removal suite is kind of a little bit different. I have some Lightning Bolts, I have 1 Electrolyze, I have 2 Anger of the Gods, and I have a Repeal, which is kind of like a removal spell. And I don't know, you can make arguments for having it either way. Like, I do think the deck needs some amount of Sweeper's main deck, and there are enough decks out there that have 3 toughness creatures that make me want to play Anger of the Gods instead of something like Pyroclasm. I have tried Pyroclasm, but with Merfolk being out there and, you know, some amount of Zoo decks too, I think like Anger is just kind of a necessity at this point, even though I would prefer to just have Pyroclasm. And to make sure that we're able to cast our Angers, we do have Cascade Bluffs in our mana base, which is very nice, very helpful. Allows you to free roll that double red, which is good. We have a card drawer in Compulsive Research, which is pretty nice in grindy matchups, either against things like Jund and Abzan, things that are shredding your hand, but also just very good in kind of like long grindy games, or in matchups where game 1 you have a bunch of removal that's not very good against them, like, you know, something like Splinter Twin or whatever. So I do like having some amount of Compulsive Research in the deck also, and then, you know, 4 Remand, pretty pretty obvious, pretty normal. I think most decks just play 4. There are certainly decks that it is not great against, but you do need some sort of interaction, and you don't want to trade 1 for 1 because eventually, at some point, you are going to want to have 8 resources. You're going to need 7 lands and a Scapeshift, so you can't just be trading 1 for 1 because by the time turn 5 rolls around, you're going to have 5 land and like a Scapeshift in your hand, and you're not going to be able to do anything with it. So, Remand gets the nod over something like Mana Leak, just because you're not necessarily trying to stop their stuff, you're just trying to buy time until you can make your land drops and play your Scapeshift. Cryptic Command's kind of the same deal. It's like this big old fog type thing. I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with that. This one has text on it, so it's very helpful, which is nice when it has 4 modes. But could play 4. I do think they're a little clunky, and they're pretty bad against things like Dispel. And you know, that's a thing that you could just be like, well, I'll just shave a Cryptic after boarding, so I'm not, you know, super weak to their Dispels or whatever. But Cryptic is a little bit clunky. You generally only need about 1 per game, so 4 is reasonable. I prefer 3. It might seem kind of weird to play 3 Cryptics and 1 Repeal, seeing as how like Cryptic is kind of like a better Repeal in some regards, where like if there's a permanent that you need to remove, then you'd much rather have the versatility of Cryptic Command. But Repeal can also do things like bounce a Cranial Plating Ornithopter for 1 mana. It can also bounce a Blood Moon pretty easily, which Cryptic Command can't really do. So there are some, you know, pros and cons to each, but I prefer having the 1 Repeal. So we'll see how that works out for us. Then the other card is like a Snapcaster Mage, which is kind of just like the 5th Scapeshift against decks with discard. Some people have a couple of these Snapcaster Mages, and that's fine. It's perfectly understandable. And then the sideboard's kind of weird. We have some cards for Twin, Burn, Affinity, and that's about it. Those are kind of like the scary matchups. I guess like Jund is another one. So like against Jund, we're going to want the Compulsive Research to draw some cards. We're going to want the Wormcoil Engine as this big threat. We're going to want maybe the Obstinate Baloths against Liliana. And, you know, that's about it. So we have 4 cards to bring in, and then we can shave things like Anger of the Gods, maybe shave some Lightning Bolts, depending on if they're Abzan or Jund, you know, depending on whether or not they have Dark Confidant. And then against Burn, we're going to want kind of the same stuff. We're going to want the Baloths and the Wormcoil Engine. I like having a Nature's Claim against them, certainly. I'm going to move this over so this stops doing that. I certainly like having 1 Nature's Claim to have an extra removal spell against Eidolon, but I also have 2 Spellskites in my board, so you can last ditch kind of like Nature's Claim your Spellskite to gain 4 life, so I think you can afford to shave on Obstinate Baloths. I could even see bringing the 2nd Nature's Claim, especially if we're bringing in Engineered Explosives to try and like beat a bunch of 1-drops, like if they have Nikotl in their deck. Then Anger of the Gods can also come out, and then you want some Dispels as well. So we end up having like a bunch of cards against Burn, when there's nothing here that is specifically for Burn except for maybe Obstinate Baloth. But a lot of these cards have other uses, and then this allows you to have like a decent amount of sideboard cards against him, because that matchup's actually kind of tough. And then for Affinity, Anger and Shatterstorm definitely, Nature's Claims also, and then you could potentially board in the Engineered Explosives. I'm not a huge fan of doing that because you always end up trading down on mana. You spend like 4 mana to kill a plating when they spent like 2 to play it and equip. And it's possible that you catch another thing, like maybe an Arcbound Ravager or Vault Scourge or whatever. But I think like we want to cut the remands and maybe the research, maybe the Snapcaster Mage. So we have enough cards to bring out that I don't think we necessarily have to dip into these Engineered Explosives, but we'll see. In my sideboard of note, there's nothing like Negate or Boseiju or Glenelender Archmage was another card that I thought might be good because it's good against like Grixis and you know, pretty good against Burn too if you're able to live long enough to drop that thing. But basically I found that like a lot of these control decks in Modern have all these soft counter spells, and it's really tough for them to actually stop your Scapeshift. Like they can remand it a couple times, but that's about it, and eventually you'll just cast it again, and they won't be able to beat it. So I just want some Dispels to fight maybe some hard counter spells, like if they're Grixis Delver, they might have some Deprives, or if they're Grixis Control, they might have some Cryptic Commands. So I just like having some Dispels to fight those, but like remands are also pretty good there too. So the control decks, you really don't need that many cards against just because you have Inevitability. You just need to not die in the meantime. You just need to make sure that they're not dropping a Tasker on you or whatever. So that's about it. I kind of like the sideboard and where it is, and I like the idea of the Coiling Oracles, but we'll see how good all these things actually end up being once we actually get to the tournament. So it's going to be a 4-round modern daily event, and should be a lot of fun. I like this deck a lot, and with the prevalence of things like Merfolk and stuff, I think this deck has gotten a lot better. So let's do it.